Hey there guys, welcome to lesson number 12. We're going to start our eye portrait today. I hope that you all got on well with the baby portrait. It's been fantastic seeing some of your work over on the Facebook group. If this is your first time visiting my YouTube channel, go and check out our Facebook group. It's called Tutorial Tuesday from Beginner to Pro. We're a really nice group and it gives you an opportunity to share your work, share your progress through the lessons, get some advice and give some advice. I've stuck down my two pieces of paper again, just like I did at the start of the baby portrait, but I wouldn't advise you doing this. When you are drawing, it's really important that you can move the paper around, but it doesn't make for a very good video, particularly when we're going through some of the important techniques when we are trying to look at getting things in the right place. So as normal, like we did with the baby portrait, what I've done is I've put two guidelines through the center of the paper. So I've marked where the center lines are, and I've done exactly the same on both pieces of paper. And we're going to be using our geared divider or artist's divider. It's a little bit like a compass. You could use a compass for this as well. Be careful with the sharp ends. You can blunt them down with a piece of sandpaper or a nail file, just so that you're not marking the paper if you drop it. And I'm using a 2H pencil for this. I would suggest you using a 2H or a 4H pencil, just so that your lines aren't too dark to begin with. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at getting some of these lines and some of these important areas of this eye down on the paper. I'm going to start off by taking the midsection, and I'm going to come out and I'm going to find where the edge of this eye comes down. So I'm finding the width, making sure that I'm not moving this in the process, and I'm just marking the paper. And I'm going to do that for all of the major references that actually intersect this line initially, and then I'm going to show you how to find the rest of the lines. So that is where the edge of this fold of skin meets the eye there, meets the line, the reference line. I've had some really good conversations with you guys over on the Facebook channel, and there's been a lot of people saying, oh, you know, when do we learn to freehand? You are learning to freehand by doing this. We can't jump in and just try and teach ourselves. I mean, you can have a go, it takes a long time, but teaching yourself exactly how to get things in line, what we're doing by using these methods, and I will go through the grid method in a few videos time with you as well, is you're training your eye to see things. Now, I'd actually have no problem freehanding this in. I'd probably just use a couple of reference lines, but I've trained my eye. I can see where certain things are lining up, how high certain things are and whatnot. But this method is what I used. I've used this over the last 3 years now. So I've done hundreds of drawings using this, and that's what's allowed me and given me the ability to then go out and do some freehand work. So I really would advise you using the grid method or this method. The thing with the grid method is you have an awful lot of lines on the paper that you've got to rub out at the end. And if you're doing commissioned work for somebody, it's very difficult to get those lines out. The more graphite you apply, the more they stand out. So I like this method because you've only got 2 lines. And again, like I say, it's training you to line things up. So in the future, when you're drawing things in future, you are able to have a better go at freehanding them. So I'm going to come and I'm going to try and find this point here now. So when we have got a reference that isn't on the line, we have to take 2 measurements. So I've got the width, and I'm going to eyeball roughly where, and this is what I'm talking about. If I was going to freehand this, I can see that it's slightly higher. The middle of this is slightly higher than where I've drawn already to mark that. So I'm going to take the width of this and I'm going to eyeball it in to roughly that position there. Now what I'm going to do is just measure the height of it and see if I've got it about right, and that's absolutely fine. So I'm going to go with that there. So I've now got a reference here which is going to line up with this tear duct, the edge of the tear duct there, and we've got now starting to get some important references, some reference lines in there. I'm going to come for this one now, which is onto the right hand side. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the width of it, and I'm going to eyeball the height. I'm going to put a mark in there, and then I'm going to measure the height. And we're not far off. And it's this method that just teaches you and gets you to understand where, like I say, where things are and how to look for references in your image that you can line up. The next one that I'm going to take is, I can see that I've got this crease here that intersects with my horizontal line. I'm going there. And I can also take a reference point off of the vertical, and I can also take one here over to the left hand side, just there. So next one, let's find the center of this pupil. So I'm going to make a mark on my reference image, but again I'm going to take the horizontal first. I think it's around about there. Then we're going to take the vertical. And as you can see there, I've measured that and I was perfectly bang on. So that's going to be the center now of my pupil. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 4 measurements, sort of north, south, east and west around, if that was the middle of my compass. I know where that centre mark is now. So I'm going to come let's take the vertical on that, because I can see where it is in line there. So I know that that's the top of the pupil here. If we take the bottom of the pupil, again, I know it's directly under the centre there, and we're going to do 2 on the east and the west, if this were our compass. And that's quite an easy method of drawing circles, getting a rough feel for the circles there. And then what we're going to do is I like to just box this off to start with. And then I'm going to get this rough circle. I mean, it's almost a perfect circle. I can see a few imperfections in the actual circle itself there. So we don't need a compass, or we don't need to draw around anything for this, because this pupil, obviously being a natural organic object, isn't going to look like a machined circle by any means. So we can get away with a few of those imperfections. I'm just going to remove now those lines that I had around the edge using my kneaded eraser. Okay, so we've got our pupil in place now. So what we're now going to look at is I'm going to start trying to get this crease here in place, and we've got most of the references. So I'm going to mark on the reference a couple of points, and I'm actually going to put those now into my drawing itself. So I'm going to take the horizontal from there, and I can see it's slightly higher than the reference point that I've got already. And then we're going to take the vertical, so slightly high, and then we'll go the same with the next line down, and that is lower than our last point. So even slightly lower than where we were there. And then the final one is lower down still. So take the And don't rush this stage. I mean, I'm trying to condense these videos down into about 30-minute sessions, but don't rush them. This is a really important stage. What I've been discussing over on the Facebook page is there are 3 things really that you want to be striving for to create realism in your drawing. One of them is an accurate sketch. So if your sketch is accurate initially, it gives you a far better chance of creating something that is realistic. The second thing is contrast. And what we mean by contrast is, this is our darkest point here, possibly here and in here. So what I now need to find is the lightest part. So the lightest parts are going to be this reflection here, the reflection here, and this area here. Everything else is in between those two, but I have to make sure that I've got this, possibly this dark ring around the iris. The eyelashes are quite dark, and certainly in there, but I'm also reinforcing these lighter areas. So we've got contrast, we've got an initial sketch that is quite realistic, it's accurate, and then the third thing is we're going to have some smooth transitions from the darks to the lights. I'm going to take one reference there just so that I get the arc of this crease correct, and we're going to take the vertical on that as well. So I can now continue that down. Okay, so we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to get this upper part of this eyelid here sketched in there, and this shape. So I'm going to take a reference here. If I use the darker pencil on the reference, just so that you've got an opportunity of seeing that. That comes up to there. I'll take one here. So let's start over to the left of the drawing, or the reference image. Double check that, and as I'm looking at this, I'm looking at this point here and how far across it is. Yeah, it is okay. So that's just a measurement that I've taken there. When I laid the divider on for this section here, it looked like it was too far across. But again, you get these illusions when you've only got a very few lines down. Sometimes it makes things appear to be in the wrong place. So double checking is really important. I always remember my dad teaching me when I was younger, when we were doing any sort of woodwork or anything DIY orientated. He always used to say to me, measure twice, cut once. And again, this applies to this. If you think something's in the wrong place, remeasure it, because you don't want to go too far down the line of drawing all of these details in and then finding out that you were wrong on one of the lines. I'm going to take a midpoint here directly above the iris, the center of the iris there. So I now know that that above there is the top, and I can see that where these two lines intersect, the edge just comes down there. So I can now get this curve in. I can bring this down into here, and then we've got this shape just there. So we've now started to get this eye. We're coming down to here. So we've already drawn this in, and I've got this reference point here. I'm going to take one reference just where the iris meets the crease of the eye there, just so I've got a guide as to where that sits, just so I'm not going too far wrong. So I'm a little bit over there, needing to be slightly over. Fab, that's there. So I can now, looking at this reference, see that that comes up. We've got a slight deviation of the line that way there. Brilliant. Okay, so let's take some points again from the middle of the iris. I want to know the width now of, the middle of the pupil to the edge of the iris. I know that that's there. And you can see I'm not using the guidelines now, I'm just using that point from the middle of the iris. The middle, I keep saying the iris, the middle of the pupil. So I now know that that is the width of this iris. I've got a reference there, so I know that that's where this comes round. So what I need now is I need to find this point over here. Where does that part of the iris, the circular, the coloured part of the eye, where does that meet the top of this eyelid? So it's there. So I've got my three references, this one and this one, and I now need to fashion a circle of sorts. Now if I hadn't got this paper taped down, I would be moving my paper now for this, but I'm quite happy with that. I've got this point here, so let's find where this part of the iris, maybe I've marked that on already, or that might have been one of my initial marks. Yep, so it's here. So I can see that this is where it comes down. Let's take one there. So it's here. Coming up to there. And it's into this. So as you can see now, what we have is we have a pretty simple representation of this eye. We know that we've got the pupil in the right place, which is always important, because the pupil being offset or slightly in the wrong place, slightly too high, can really throw the realism off. We know we've got the width of the eyeball correct, the distance is here, and we can check that. So this is the lid of the eye there, so we can now measure this. So let's just see if we are anywhere near. So that's there to there, that's just above the pupil, and there to there. So we're checking and we can see that we have got this right, because again, it can be an optical illusion sometimes that we've got things in the wrong place because we've not got this detail in here of the eyelashes. It makes this look fatter or wider than it actually is. Let's get some loose representations of where this hair comes. So on the horizontal, I know that it's coming out to there. It's very, very close to here. Let's measure how high up that goes. So this is a very simple process. I'm using my left hand for this, but I'm right-handed. You use your right hand to measure to start with. I was saying to somebody on the Facebook group only a couple of days ago, maybe a week ago, that I've done this hundreds of times. They said, oh, you know, you make it look so simple. It's because I've done this hundreds, and literally I mean hundreds of times. I've done hundreds of drawings over the last 3 years, and I've used this method hundreds of times. So really what we need to do now is we're just going to get an idea as to where this this highlight of the eye is coming in. I'm going to eyeball this. So we're coming in at this sort of angle, somewhere there. So it's almost like a wedge of cheese coming into the pupil, and it comes into the pupil here. This is a very, very close-up view of the eye. We've got some details in there. I'm guessing they're reflections. What you can see in this, which will set the drawing off, is we can see the reflections of even the eyelashes in here. So as the eyelashes are curling out and up, we can see in this highlighted area there that we've got the reflections there. Whenever you can get details like that in the reflection of the eye, it just really sets it off. I can see we've got a line of some sort. So we're just getting the major areas in, just plotting those major areas out. We've got some of these striations, these muscles that contract the pupil, making your pupil bigger and smaller as the light hits it. So we're going round and we're going to get that. We've got some creases under the eye here that we're going to pay attention to. We've got some details around there, but we're sort of there. I think you're getting the general idea and the gist of it. Not forgetting these types of details that are just going to set it off. In the tear duct here, we've just got a little hint of something being in here, and we're just going to pay real attention to this. So I think that's enough for today's lesson. We're almost there with this. Next lesson we're going to start adding some value in. We're going to start coming into the darker areas. So I hope you followed this so far. You can print the reference image off on the Facebook page. If you go to the top under photos, it's also in the announcements, so you'll be able to print that off. Make it whatever size you want to do, and have some fun with it. Have a go with the divider if you've got one, or a compass. If you haven't, maybe try the grid method. It doesn't even matter if you go and trace this or use a light box, because what we're doing is we're just getting the basic structure down, and then we're going to really start adding the value and bringing in the realism, and really trying to emphasize these white hairs, these wispy white hairs. So I hope you have some fun with that. If you've not subscribed to the channel, go and subscribe and hit the notifications icon. Come and join the group on Facebook. Just leave me a quick ask to join and I'll confirm that for you. We're sitting over 1,000 members now, which is fantastic. So thank you so much for your support. It's been really really lovely getting to know some of you and seeing some of your drawings. I really like seeing some of the babies, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Hit subscribe, smack the notifications button, follow me on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter.